She didn't panic when I confronted her. She didn't flinch, didn't deny it, didn't even look nervous. She just tilted her head slightly and said, "You're not handling this very well." That sentence hit harder than the confession. I told her I knew she was cheating. She nodded, almost approvingly, like I'd finally caught up. "Yes," she said. "And before you ask, I don't regret it." I waited for the apology. It never came. Instead, she sighed and added, "I'm being honest with you. Most people would lie. You should appreciate that." I felt small standing there, not because she cheated, but because she was looking down on me while admitting it. When I asked how long it had been going on, she shrugged. "Long enough. That detail doesn't change anything." I told her she destroyed our marriage. She smiled faintly and said, "This marriage has been broken for a long time. I just had the courage to face it." In that moment, something inside me went cold. I realized she didn't feel shame. She felt superior. And that was when I understood the marriage was already over. Not because she cheated, but because she believed she was above the damage she caused. Before everything tilted, our marriage felt equal. Not perfect, but balanced. We made decisions together. Disagreed without contempt. I never felt like I was being evaluated or measured against some invisible standard. She used to speak with me, not at me. When we had problems, they were framed as us issues, not personal failures. I trusted her opinions because they came from partnership, not judgment. Looking back, I realize how much I valued that sense of equality. I believed respect was the foundation of what we had. Even when life got heavy, work stress, routine, fatigue, I never felt beneath her. I felt chosen. We had inside jokes, shared habits, a quiet rhythm that made me believe we were growing together, not apart. I assumed emotional safety meant permanence. What I didn't see was that while I was holding on to that balance, something in her was shifting, not away from the marriage all at once, but upward, above it, and eventually above me. At the time, I thought we were still partners. I didn't realize she had already started seeing herself as something more, and me as something less. The first changes weren't about what she said, but how she said it. Her tone sharpened in small, almost invisible ways. Conversations that used to feel mutual started feeling instructional. She corrected me more. Not playfully, precisely. If I disagreed, she'd sigh and say, "That's not what I meant," like I was struggling to keep up. Jokes turned into lectures. Opinions became verdicts. When I expressed frustration or hurt, she didn't engage with the feeling. She analyzed it. "You're projecting. You're being emotional. You're taking this personally." Somehow, my reactions became evidence that I was the problem. I started choosing my words carefully, trying not to trigger that look, the one that said she was already 2 steps ahead and slightly disappointed I wasn't there with her. It felt less like communication and more like being assessed. At the time, I told myself she was just more confident, more self-aware, maybe even growing. I convinced myself this was maturity. What I didn't realize was that respect was quietly draining out of her voice. And once that happens, love doesn't stay far behind. The red flags were there, but they wore the disguise of growth and honesty, so I minimized them. She started dismissing my concerns as insecurity. If I brought up feeling disconnected, she'd respond with, "You need to work on that," instead of asking why I felt that way. Problems stopped being shared, they were diagnosed. She compared me to people I'd never met. "Other men don't react like this. Most people would understand." It always sounded subtle, almost reasonable, but it chipped away at me. I told myself she was just being direct. There were moments when she'd speak about our marriage like she was already outside of it, analyzing it from a distance. "This dynamic isn't healthy," she'd say, without including herself in the equation. I felt the imbalance, but I ignored it. I thought love meant absorbing discomfort without pushing back. I thought patience would bring us back to center. What I didn't want to admit was that minimizing those red flags meant minimizing myself. And the more I did that, the easier it became for her to treat me like someone beneath her, not beside her. The first moment it became unmistakable was during an argument that shouldn't have been won. I told her I felt shut out lately, like I was talking at her instead of with her. She listened quietly, then smiled, not warmly, but knowingly, and said, "You're still stuck in the same emotional patterns." Not we. You. That word landed harder than anything else. She wasn't trying to understand me. She was diagnosing me. From above. I tried to explain what I meant, but she interrupted with, "This is exactly what I'm talking about." You can't self-reflect. Her tone was calm, almost patient, like she was speaking to someone who just didn't get it yet. I remember sitting there, feeling embarrassed for even opening my mouth, like I'd failed some invisible test. I apologized, even though I wasn't sure what for. That was the moment I realized something had shifted. She wasn't frustrated with me. She wasn't hurt. She was disappointed. And worse, she thought she was better. After that, her behavior changed in ways that were impossible to unsee. She stopped treating my reactions as valid responses and started treating them as flaws to be corrected. Disagreements no longer had tension. They had conclusions. Hers. If I pushed back, she'd lean into that calm tone and say, "You're proving my point," as if my disagreement itself was evidence of my inferiority. She became emotionally efficient. No lingering conversations. No effort to meet me where I was. Everything was framed as her being clear and evolved, and me being reactive and behind. I found myself explaining my feelings like I was defending a thesis. Even her distance felt intentional, controlled. When I pulled away, she didn't follow. She watched, almost curious, like she was observing how I'd handle being cut off from her approval. What scared me most was how composed she was. No anger, no chaos, just quiet dominance. That's when I understood this wasn't stress or growth. It was power. She didn't lie the way people usually do. She told partial truths and called it honesty, then acted offended if I questioned anything. When I noticed inconsistencies, she'd say, "I'm being transparent. You're just uncomfortable with the truth." Every contradiction was reframed as my inability to handle reality, not her failure to be consistent. She'd admit just enough to sound evolved. "Yes, I've been talking to him more. Yes, I connect with him." But anything beyond that was labeled invasive. "Why do you need details?" she'd ask, like my confusion was a character flaw. Facts were presented like favors. If she clarified something, it came with a look that said I should be grateful she bothered. And if I pushed too far, she'd shut down completely and accuse me of crossing boundaries. Over time, I stopped trusting my instincts. I started questioning whether clarity was too much to ask. That's the danger of lies dressed up as honesty. They make you feel unreasonable for wanting the full truth. By the time I realized what was happening, reality had already been rewritten to make me the problem. By the time the affair actually existed, she was already emotionally unreachable. The detachment came first, clean, deliberate, and complete. She stopped leaning on me for anything real. No stress, no doubts, no vulnerability. I was no longer her emotional home. I was just there. Someone who shared space, not intimacy. When I tried to reconnect, she responded with polite distance. Not rejection, something colder. Indifference disguised as maturity. "I don't need that kind of reassurance," she'd say, as if emotional closeness was a weakness she'd outgrown. Intimacy faded without conflict. If I noticed, she framed it as personal growth. I'm more in tune with myself now. There was always a subtle implication that wanting closeness meant I hadn't evolved. What I didn't understand then was that detachment isn't neutral. It's a decision. She wasn't overwhelmed or confused. She was reallocating her emotional energy elsewhere. The affair didn't pull her away from me. It arrived after she'd already disconnected. By the time someone else stepped in, there was nothing left between us to protect. The realization came when I stopped trying to fix things and watched what happened. Nothing did. I pulled back emotionally, expecting concern or at least curiosity. Instead, she seemed relieved. Like my absence made things easier, not harder. That's when it hit me. She didn't need me anymore, not emotionally, not even for validation. She spoke about me to others differently too. Not disrespectfully on the surface, but with a tone that suggested I was a limitation she'd outgrown. "He struggles with emotional awareness," she said once, right in front of me, like she was explaining a concept. I felt reduced, categorized, something to be understood, not valued. When I asked her if she still respected me, she paused just long enough to be honest. "I respect where you are," she said. "Not you. Where you are." That answer stayed with me. She didn't see me as a partner anymore. She saw me as someone beneath her, someone she'd already moved past. And in that moment, I realized the affair wasn't about desire. It was about superiority. I didn't catch her cheating through a dramatic mistake or a hidden phone. It came out casually, almost arrogantly, like she didn't care if I knew. A name slipped in conversation, one I hadn't heard before. When I asked about it, She looked at me calmly and said, "It's someone I've been spending time with." No hesitation, no shame, just matter-of-fact delivery. I asked when it started. She didn't hesitate. "Long enough. You were too wrapped up in yourself to notice," she said, almost with pity. Her tone wasn't defensive. It was superior, like she was teaching me a lesson. Every little detail I'd ignored. The distance, the subtle corrections, the honest explanations snapped into place. I realized this wasn't sudden. It wasn't a mistake. It had been building while I believed we were equal. When I tried to express the hurt, she tilted her head and said, "You're overreacting. I'm being truthful. That's the hard part for you." In that instant, I understood. The affair wasn't just cheating. It was a declaration of her power, her detachment, and the final proof that I had already lost her emotionally. When I finally confronted her, I expected anger, tears, or at least hesitation. Instead, she leaned back, crossed her arms, and looked at me like I was a child struggling to understand a lesson. "I know what you're going to say," she began calmly. "Yes, I've been seeing him. But you're making it bigger than it is." I tried to get her to see the damage, to at least acknowledge the betrayal. She sighed, almost pitying me. "I'm being honest. You should appreciate that. Most people lie." I asked why she didn't care about how this would hurt me. She tilted her head, eyes steady, and said, "Care? I've cared. You just didn't notice." The marriage was already over emotionally. Every word cut sharper than any accusation could have. She wasn't defensive. She wasn't remorseful. She was superior, calm, composed, untouchable. In that moment, I realized the truth. This wasn't just an affair. This was her proving she had already stepped above me, emotionally, morally, and mentally. And there was nothing I could do to bring her down. I kept waiting for it. The crack, the falter, the tiniest flicker of guilt. It never came. She didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She didn't even look conflicted. Instead, she gave me that same calm, measured look, like a teacher evaluating a student. "Why would I feel guilty?" she asked. "I'm being honest. I'm telling you the truth. Isn't that what matters?" I told her she destroyed everything. She leaned back and said softly, "It was already broken. You just didn't see it. I had to act, and I did. I'm not a villain for facing reality." Her words weren't meant to justify her actions. They were meant to assert her superiority. She was untouchable, above reproach, and somehow above me. When I tried to express my pain, she responded as if I were overreacting, like my heartbreak was predictable, almost childish. She didn't just cheat. She cheated and made me feel small for expecting basic empathy. That's when it hit me. The worst betrayal isn't the affair itself. It's discovering someone can hurt you, feel no shame, and believe they are morally superior while doing it. After that conversation, everything inside me broke at once. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even betrayal alone. It was humiliation. The crushing awareness that I had loved someone who looked down on me while dismantling our life. Every memory, every effort, every moment I tried to hold us together felt pointless. I replayed the months I'd ignored the signs, the subtle corrections, the honest lies, the quiet superiority in her tone. Each one stacked on the last until it became unbearable. I realized I had been clinging to a marriage that existed only in my mind. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus. I felt exposed, stripped of illusions, powerless against someone who had already decided she was above me. The collapse wasn't sudden. It was a slow release of years of denial, of trying to meet someone who had already left emotionally, morally, and mentally. And in that emptiness, I saw clearly for the first time. I was grieving not just the affair, but the cruel truth that she had always believed she was better than me. The decision didn't come with fireworks or dramatic confrontation. It came quietly, like a weight lifting off my chest. I realized I had been chasing someone who didn't want to be caught. Every question I asked, every attempt to express pain or seek clarity, only reinforced her sense of superiority. She wasn't confused. She wasn't conflicted. She was untouchable, and my efforts meant nothing. I stopped arguing. I stopped pleading. I stopped expecting remorse or empathy. Not because I understood her, but because I finally accepted that nothing I did could change her perspective or her detachment. For the first time in months, I put myself first. I matched her distance, not out of spite, but out of survival. No more chasing approval, no more defending my pain. It was the first moment I chose self-respect over illusion, reality over hope, and my own peace over a woman who had already walked above me emotionally, morally, and mentally. Letting go wasn't victory, it was sanity. With distance came clarity, harsh, unflinching clarity. Once I stopped chasing her, I could see the marriage for what it really was, hollow, one-sided, and sustained entirely by my effort and denial. The fog lifted, and I finally understood that love without reciprocity isn't love, it's surrender. She didn't reach out. She didn't attempt to mend anything. Her silence confirmed what I had feared all along. She had already elevated herself above me emotionally, morally, and mentally, and there was nothing left to salvage. Detachment wasn't coldness, it was truth. I stopped protecting her image in my mind and started protecting my own reality. The pain didn't disappear, but it became clear, uncompromised by illusions or hope. The lesson is simple but brutal. When someone cheats and feels morally superior, believe them. Remorse matters more than honesty. Love without empathy is emotional abandonment. Self-respect begins the moment you stop begging someone to care. Cheating hurts, but cheating without guilt, while acting superior, is the final betrayal.